Hi, Sarah.
Hello, we did it. This is
That's
very
actually
exciting.
a little less stressful than before, actually. Good to see you.
It's good to see you too.
And it's amazing that it's the morning and I'm in California and you're in sunny UK right now.
It is amazing. Sunny UK. I've had it all going on the last 2 hours. Awful kid pickup in the rain.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Slightly different lives today, Josh.
slightly different lives. Yeah. So tell me, today we're going to be looking at how to start recovery from trauma.
That's
Um,
it, exactly. And I think first it's probably worth saying, I'm guessing everyone who's joined, I recognise quite a few names, but for those who maybe have just hopped on because they saw us come live, that this is the second
yeah.
episode, second time we've done this. We've started a live that's happening monthly. This is the second time. It's called Talking Trauma, and it's honest conversations about healing is the idea. And today we thought it'd be useful to talk about how to start healing.
Yeah. And so, I mean, that's I think actually is the bravest move that anyone can make in any therapeutic journey is to start. And I hear how difficult that is for people. I don't know about you, but in my experience, I have people who email me and then I don't hear from them for 9 months and then they email again. And there's a lot of process that goes on there. And I'm just curious, in your experience, Sarah, what do you want to say about that? And what would you like our listeners and viewers to know about starting a process?
About starting the process. I mean, for me, I contemplated this question today and I scribbled about 4 pages of notes. I can scan them and send them to anyone that needs them. So really what I'm saying is there's so much to say.
Yeah.
There's a lot to say about this. The main thing that came to mind, probably with my practitioner hat on, is that it's all about stabilisation.
Yeah.
You know, the first thing we're trying to do really is understand that we all come to that start point at a different place. We all have different levels of safety within our nervous system. Some who have developmental trauma have no sense of safety within their nervous system. There's no kind of touch point in terms of regulation. Others may have some, others will move in and out of it. But the first step for all of us is increasing that, is really moving into, I almost feel like, I don't know if you would agree with this, but for me, the first step is the body,
Yeah.
is moving into the parasympathetic, is allowing ourselves, almost understanding, okay, I want to heal. So to heal in terms of the nervous system, we have to begin to move more frequently into rest and repair.
Yeah.
So we have to increase that, you know, almost as if we would for a child. There is just that sense of, okay, I need to heal. So then we take practical steps, quite very practical steps really, in terms of actually understanding that, acknowledging it, and helping our bodies, you know, getting more rest. It's the you know, it's relatively boring stuff, but it's so essential at the start, is getting more sleep, getting more rest, increasing that sense of mind-body connection, doing what we can really to help ourselves move into a space that's going to give us the best outcomes.
Yeah. It's funny you were saying, because where my head went when we were first talking about this was like, I was putting myself in the shoes of a potential client, and I was thinking, well, the first place to start is actually just to ask around. Is to ask around, like, you don't need to reveal to anyone what your symptoms are or what your problems are, but just ask around. Hey, do you know of anyone who's been really helpful in this area? You know, that power of word of mouth is really, really essential. And then the reaching out, and what I would say to people like is, people have a lot of fear that they're going to turn up into a practice and go straight into having the biggest fear and assessment that I have is, oh, I don't want to sit there and just tell everyone all my problems, that say in a group setting, all my problems straight away. Like, I just don't have strength for that. Or they might say in an assessment in a one-to-one space, like, look, I don't know you. I don't feel comfortable telling you all these things. Like, how am I going to get through that? And they may report that they feel safe in the room and things like that. So it really comes to what you're saying about stabilization, is if it really is the very beginning, that's what we're doing as clinicians, is helping you feel safe and stable to get to the next stage. So I want to try and allay people's fears that you don't have to dive into all of these things and tell me everything. You don't need to tell me anything to begin with. We're just going to see what it's like to be in the room together. Let's look at how you breathe. Tell me a little bit about how you sleep. Tell me a little bit about who your friends are. Tell me a little bit about what are the things that you really value. Tell me a little bit about your life in that sense, just to help, as you say, calm the nervous system. Because if our nervous system isn't regulated, we can't do any work. And yeah, then that's something that, you know, and as you said, people keep coming in from very different stages. I was working with someone recently and they've done 2 years of therapy. So it's like, that's very different to someone who comes in and says, I've never done anything like this before, and I'm terrified, or I'm numb. Or the opposite can happen. I don't know if you've seen this, but like, someone comes in and within 5 minutes they've told you everything at 1,000 miles an hour. Again, we want to try and bring things down. And you mentioned the body there and connection to the body. And this seems, I know this confuses a lot of people. They're like, well, what do you mean by the body? So I'm just curious to know what you mean by starting to work with the body first.
Well, it's where it all is. You know, that's the key. And I think the thing that we're navigating as practitioners is that basic truth that the body is where the healing resources are. You know, it's where the healing is going to take place, but it's also where the terror and the sense of loss, it's all in there. So the trauma's in there and the healing's in there. So, and because of that, so many of us with trauma have, to a greater or lesser extent, disconnected from our body. So, you know, the first step in my program that I run is mind body connection in the most simple way, the most gentle of ways, because everything we're going to talk about during this series, I hope, makes it really clear to people that there's this tension, there's this kind of, we're trying to get things moving, we're trying to move into flexibility, into flow, but we all know as practitioners that if we do too much too soon, that's it. You know, it's game over. So, and the safest way as practitioners is to do less, is to go slower. You know, and if I can feel that part of me, I'm in WA, I'm a workaholic, I've got that part of me that's like, go, 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 go. If I feel that part of me that wants to move quickly with the client, it's that immediate kind of self-recognition. Okay, that's really interesting. You need to slow down. So it's us as practitioners being insightful enough and connected to our own nervous systems that we can feel that pull, and that we ensure we're constantly slowing down as well.
Yeah, and I really like the fact that you used the word gentle there. You know, on our programs, we start exactly the same like you. We start with the body, and like Christina will be, yeah, she's a TCTSY practitioner, which is a form of trauma sensitive yoga, and so much of the emphasis is on gentle invitational language, just allowing people to land, and that particular style of yoga is not about rigor and vigor and breathing fast and moving through movements really quickly. It's all about bringing a sense of gentleness to the mind, and allowing people to then feel safe enough to start to explore their bodies. Because as you said, I see this all the time. People are so disconnected from their body. And the reason for that, I think, is very, very simple and understandable, is that if you're having such intense emotions, and emotions always manifest in various parts of the body, you know, we feel intense sadness in our throat, we tend to feel anger in our hands and our head, we tend to feel shame in our stomach. If they're so intense and we've got to carry on with our day, we've got to feed the kids, we've got to make important business decisions, we've got to survive and hear how our parents are being in the evening, whatever it is, it's totally understandable to shut that down so that you can keep functioning. And the sad thing is, you know, is that over time that becomes kind of automatized. and then we lose all that information that the body's telling us. Like Christina's often talking about, like, if people don't, we, you know, as clinicians, we talk about interoception, which is the capacity to notice what's going on inside us. And if we lose those interoceptive capacities, we can, like, not even observe if we're hungry or thirsty.
Yeah, it's
You know,
incredible.
just,
I mean, it's wild. It is completely incredible. And actually, I think what's coming to mind as well is there is that disconnect, but also it pulls in, as you said, it pulls in like compulsions and addictions, because so I'm sure you have the same experience. I mean, in my mind, you can't treat one without treating the other. You know, when I'm treating trauma, I'm also treating compulsion, because that's where it moves us to, because we're trying to avoid, and that's why we compulsively work or compulsively clean the house or compulsively drink. You know, because there is that avoidance of kind of that disconnect from those uncomfortable feelings. And so when we're thinking about where we start trauma healing, you know, that's also very, very, very relevant. Is so often we need to begin to acknowledge and kind of put down. We need to begin to kind of put down with support. And for those of us who have been, you know, or anyone listening who's really in it in terms of an addiction,
yeah,
of course we need support. But that's the first thing. We can't consider doing trauma healing when there's that level of disconnect.
yeah, because I'm glad you mentioned that, because with addiction, when we get to that stage of full-blown addiction, what people are doing is they're bringing in their minds a sense of control about when they feel and don't feel. And you know, the pill, the drug, the gambling, the sex, whatever it is always done in an allegedly controlled manner, so that the feelings, so there's no surprise around the feelings. And this is, as you say, if we're going to start any trauma treatment, and there is definitely an addictive piece, the abstinence part comes first. Like, we cut it. Just, I get, and this is something that I find very difficult with certain colleagues and supervision groups and things, is a lot of people are just trained that addiction is the result of symptoms of trauma, which there is a large aspect of that, and they believe that if we just treat the trauma, the addiction will go away. But actually, we need the abstinence to even begin to be able to do any form of trauma treatment. It's very, very, it's almost impossible to do otherwise. So if there is that compulsive piece, as you say, that's got to go first.
And it's so interesting, because even as I think about that, you know, as I kind of relate that to my own journey, there were some very active addictions that anyone would call an addiction, you know, in terms of my anorexia or my drinking. But then there are others that are much more subtle, you know, before I mentioned my, you know, my relationship with work, that can be very compulsive. It's very subtle. Looking from the outside in, you'd go, she's totally fine. But it's that nuanced understanding. It's me knowing, no, there is a compulsion there. When I'm feeling uncomfortable, my mind goes, I'll think about work. So it's so, like everything we talk about, it's a spectrum, isn't it? And no one, I think what I'm saying is, you don't have to, and no one can completely rule out compulsions. It's part of how the nervous system works, right? We're hardwired to become hardwired. There's a normalcy to it. But when we're in that top peak end, that you really can recognize there is that addictive process going on, it fundamentally, it has to be dealt with before we can get real and authentic. And that's scary.
It's really scary. And I think actually, with more behavioral compulsions, you can start earlier. So, for example, I work with a lot of people who are very codependent. You know, they're using themselves as drugs for everyone else. They're trying to fix. They're trying to make people please. They're trying to just like put all their focus on other people to make everyone else feel okay. You can work with that. And I would say probably it's easier to work with codependence, relationship addictions, work addictions. But if someone's got like a physical dependency on benzodiazepines or something like that, then it's just not going to touch it at all. So I think, to go back to the beginning of what you're saying, like, a large part of starting a trauma healing process is, as you say, stabilisation. And within that, really good honest, open assessment. We need to look at everything going on, not just the trauma symptoms, but what's going on in terms of behavior, what's going on in terms of medication. These are all really important things to factor in.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I was kind of trying to visualize it in my mind about what we're doing, about how you kind of connect the dots between the addiction piece, say, and mind body connection. You know, how on earth are these all part of the same thing that is trauma healing? And I don't know if you explain it this way, but certainly in my program, and I very much follow a kind of somatic parts approach to healing. So the journey of trauma healing is a reconnection with the self. Like, to me, that's the like top line, is that's what we're trying to do, is see these triggered parts, see how they interact, and how that's playing out in your behaviors, your addictions, your compulsions. Really what we're trying to do is reconnect to self. And that's how they're the same, they're part of the same story. You know, addiction is a disconnect from self. There is a disconnection from an authentic experience because it's painful. I'm feeling completely worthless, so I'm going to have a drink. That is a disconnection from self. So really that's what we're trying to do, is that slow move into slowly, gently reconnect to self, reconnect to the body.
And when you talk about reconnecting to the body, which you did right at the beginning, I mean, it's so simple in some ways, but I will sometimes say to people, that's where you live. You are it. That's where you exist, is in your body. And if you are disconnected in any way, it must be a frightening and lonely place to not even be able to be in there. So that sensitivity and that gentleness of reconnecting to the body, as you say, is absolutely essential. And in assessment, we'll always look out for like where people are at in that. Sometimes it can be very clear that people are and have good awareness of their body, and sometimes that will just come about by asking someone, you know, what do you feel right now? And some people will go, what do you mean? You know, and where do you feel it? I have no idea what you're talking about. We know that, okay, we've got to start in a very different place to someone who's saying, do you know what, I feel anxious and ashamed, and I feel it in my heart and I feel it in my stomach right now. So we're always looking out for how people communicate where they're at in their bodies as a starting point. And I think it's really essential for that. And so this is why I know that you agree with this and everything, is that there is such an emphasis within the community of trauma healing on body work and on activities like yoga and anything that, but yoga in particular because it's so popular, but other interoceptive activities like qigong and tai chi and certain sports and things are all about just relearning how your body works and operates, and that is so important. And there was something else as well. I was very impacted by a section in The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk. There's so much in that book, but there was one part where he was talking about how one client he knew got better just from a massage. That was all it took. The intervention was just massage. That got them back and connected in their body, and they're able to get back up on their feet again. Now, I think that's rare, but still very powerful illustration of that.
I wish that we had a somatic practitioner here, because it's, you know, as you're saying, anyone that works in trauma has to work somatically, and you just have to. That's the whole goal, is that reconnection. But speaking to somatic practitioners who really understand the you know, the where it's stored and the quality of different micro movements, or even craniosacral. I was listening to something about that today. It's incredible, absolutely incredible.
And I noticed that in your book, one of the earliest parts where in your book, you often, you know, you give a lot of practical advice, which is really essential for people. Is that actually the earliest stabilization you talk about is breath work. and give a couple of pages of various forms of breath work that are really impactful that you've noticed. And that's a form of stabilization, and getting, connecting to the breath. It's going on inside your body, and that's often the earliest and easiest exercise to begin with people. And I don't know about you, but I'm constantly finding new and hearing about, it's amazing, this simple thing called breath, yet there's so many different techniques. I'm always finding different ones and finding out from my clients which one worked best for them. And I'm wondering if there are any new breathing techniques, or just any that you want to share now that you find particularly helpful to help people.
In terms of breathing techniques, I mean, for me, it's more of a principle, actually, Josh, because I'm really fascinated in this idea. We all know we need to learn to regulate. We've got to learn to regulate, and we'll use polyvagal breathing to help everything calm down. But the truth is that what we're trying to do is authentically connect to our nervous system and get a sense of what's going on. So actually, if there's a huge amount of energy in there, if there's rage, if there's anxiety, if you're really in it, forcing your body into that calm space is often, it's not, in my experience with clients, it's not the right move. There needs to be which is why that mind body connection is so important, because we've got to be able to think, okay, well, where am I? And people listening, you can quite simply assess that. If, as you try and do polyvagal breathing, or any kind of breathing that's aimed to relax, if you feel panicked in response to that, I would say to you, it's okay. Your body, your energy is calling for a different type of breath or a different type of movement. One that I'll use if I can feel that I'm getting activated, stressed, rather than trying to calm before I do that, it's loud noises. It's even if you think about that VU noise, it's that really guttural noises, but that people are it feels a bit odd. But if you came to my house, you'd see me all the time, in front of the children. We hiss, we just get it out. So actually, I feel like that's a really important balance point to this. We breathe to calm. It's yes, and there's this other energy in there that isn't bad or good. Authentically see that, and allow yourself to explore with how to express that in a way that feels good, and then maybe move into polyvagal breathing.
Yeah, and I wholeheartedly agree with that. A lot of the time I'm encouraging people to do a form of breath work that's called resonant breathing or coherent breathing, which is the sort of antithesis of calming. It's just about, we want our parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous systems to be in balance. We don't want to tip either one. So that's all about keeping you activated. And so often it's about breathing in for 5 and out for 5 or something like that, so that we're not trying to go straight into a deep, calming, yogic style breathing when someone's really activated. It's like a bridge down. Someone's maybe really, really highly activated, highly anxious, highly rageful. Okay, let's try and get a little bit of balance in the breath before we try and calm people down. And actually, and the other way around is true as well. Like, if people are in a very dissociated state where we might, they've zoned out, they're just kind of not really in the room, they're trying, the last thing we want to do is do some really calming breath work with them, because they're going to be even less connected with what's going on. We might want to do some breath work that activates them. So I love the fact that you're talking about, we've got to meet people where they're at in the moment, and then come up with very simple techniques to just maybe just lower or raise the level within the context of the room, instead of like automatically going to some kind of like in for 3, hold for 4, out for 7 or something that is excellent in certain times, but sometimes can be exactly what's not needed.
And I don't know if you find this, but initially, people who, a new client, there is such a nervousness around, and they want to be told what to do, and I get that. I mean, I've absolutely been there. But then actually, as they progress, as they move into stabilization, you know, they do the trauma work into, and they begin to integrate. What happens as we do that is that the nervous system becomes more flexible. So we see a natural spontaneity, you know, as I can now respond to what I feel as a result of the healing that I've done. So it's very hard to do that if there is that disconnect, and you're right at the beginning. It's something that will come slowly, that flexibility and spontaneity and ability to really feel what's really going on, and move it.
Yeah, and there's something, just as we move towards the end of the session, you know, if there are people wondering, like, why are we focusing on stabilization and not necessarily, like, at the beginning of a process, just going into, like, history, trauma history, and the reason for that is that some people need the safety and the regulation and the co-regulation in the room to be able to then describe their history. Some people cannot tell their history. And then we get some other people who have told their history so many times that they're completely disconnected from it. You know, I did this, and then this happened, and then this happened, and I went there. And so allowing people to just be really present in the room and feeling safe and stable allows us to really see what's going on. Because a lot of the time people think that something should be traumatic for them, but they're not connected, that it isn't for them. And then there are other things that they just can't connect to because they're just so focused on you or the moment. Or because of that, when we bring people very gently and safely into their bodies, they start to feel what the emotional connection is to certain parts. You know, and I see this all the time in group work, especially. People come in and say, I want to work on the arguments I always had with my mother as a child. That's what the big issue is. And then when they feel calm and safe, they're like, actually, it's not about my mother at all. It's about my friend who left when I was young. And so when we're safe and calm, our amygdala quietens down, our prefrontal cortex is a bit more active, and then we're able to really, in a calm and safe way, look at what we really need to work on. So that's one reason I think it's really important that people listening understand why there is this focus on stabilization.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think sometimes I get annoyed with the term because it feels like it devalues what's happening. There's almost a disconnect, or there's been a separation in how, as practitioners, we describe, you know, there's stabilization, then there's trauma work, then there's the integration. I know I used that language before. Stabilization is healing. There is healing going on. It's not like, no, you're not ready. That it's part of it. It's beautiful. You know, as I work with clients in that part, it's there is progress. That's what I'm saying. It's not like there's a feeling of, oh, I'm just not doing it. There is movement, and there's self-worth building, there's connection, there's a internal sense of safety. These things that so many of my clients have yearned for is building. You know, I've had some clients who've stayed in that stabilization phase for maybe a couple of years, and that's okay. It's beautiful. Their recovery is so solid because of it.
Yeah, and if anyone wants to geek out on the therapeutic healing stabilization, there's a great study. If you look up Dr. Derek Farrell's Mekong Delta study, it's really, really interesting that they showed just how powerful stabilization is. It's therapeutic in itself. And as you say, amazing for building up self-esteem, self-worth, and a really useful resource to draw upon in terms of resilience. Well, Sarah, we've come to time.
We have. There we go. I could talk for hours.
It just goes on. It goes so fast, and it's always a pleasure to see you and to speak with you. And I hope that everyone listening has got value from this, and I look forward to seeing you again in a month.
I hope so too. Thanks for joining us, guys. Josh, great to see you, and we will convene in a month.
Okay, take care, everyone.
Take care.
Bye.
See you. Bye. Bye.